there, Super Conscious Success fam. Welcome to another episode of my podcast, where I connect with spiritual leaders, star seeds, and light workers to help you to connect with your higher self and source to discover your truth and embrace the divine being you're designed to be. This podcast is aimed at helping you to discover the light, both inside and outside, and eliminate the fear that our 3D reality and our ego insists on pushing onto us. Once we discover who we truly are and we live from a place of love rather than fear, then we can ascend into the higher dimensions. So in today's podcast, I have an exciting guest that I am so happy to introduce you to because I've never had a guest on here that talks about hand analysis. And so in order to be able to, he actually works to actually discover your purpose and release those shadow sides that you may be struggling with. Now, his name is Brent Bruning, and he is a master hand analyst and life transformation coach, and he has studied over 20,000 pairs of hands, including those from Tony Robbins, Eminem, Ben Stiller, Richard Branson, Snoop Dogg, and so many more. Now, his method, it's not palmistry, it's actually a way for him to see who you really are and the life that you're meant for. So let's get on to chatting with Brent, because I am absolutely fascinated. Hey, Brent, how are you going today?
Fantastic, and welcome from Lago di Garda, Italy. I'm based out of Switzerland, right? So when you're getting your hand, it's usually on Central European time. So it's really fabulous to be able to connect with you while I'm also enjoying life here in Italy.
Absolutely. It's, Italy's such a beautiful country, as is Switzerland. So what time is it over there then? Because it was Central European was 3:30. Is it the same time? Like, is there like a difference there?
Yeah, so if you're on Central European time, if you're watching from London, that would be like an hour behind you, right?
Okay.
So,
yep, cool.
Right. No, sorry, hour ahead of you. So if you're at 3 o'clock, it's going to be 4 o'clock in Switzerland. And
nice.
Usually it's about a 6 difference from the United States if you got people that are listening from there.
Fantastic. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful countries. Like I was telling you before the interview, I've lived in Germany for a couple of years, and things are so easy. It's so easy to get around the place from in Europe, as opposed to Australia, where it takes us about 5 hours just to get to the other side. So thank you so much for being here with me today, Brent, because we got some really interesting information that we can bring to the listeners as to another way that we can actually tap into our purpose, tap into, how we're able to get rid of that shadow side or work with the shadow side, and a whole heap of other stuff. So I'm really excited to be talking to you about it. But before we do, how about you just let our listeners know how you came to be interested in this and what your journey's been like?
Well, my background is in software robotics, right? So I've been working as a consulting contractor. That's why I'm in Switzerland in the first place. So I was doing in engineering for the big banks here. And on the side, I would do something goofy. Like every time I take a holiday, I'd try to do some big life picture of my life purpose, see if I'm on track. Mm-hmm. And every time I'd get a tarot card or a palmistry read, I just thought that was just a great kick. And it always seemed to answer the next chapter that I would be moving on back in Switzerland. And in this particular inquiry at the time, which was back in 2007, I picked up this old dusty palmistry book from like the 1880s from a man named Cairo who had been traveling around. It was his autobiography. And it was basically a man who was traveling around reading all the princes and the kings and Oscar Wilde and Mark Twain, these authors. And I thought, that is a cool life. I mean, regardless of whether you're a palmist, that's the amazing life. And then just reading that book, and I had that. I'm reading this book by Neil Strauss about this guy who's recovering his passion, and he's ultimately trying to be a ladies' man, and he's using hands to meet women. And I was just putting the two together, and I was like, and the book that I had read before that was Twins Separated from Birth. So you can just imagine. I'm a software engineer, right? So I'm used to like having like a UFO dropped in my lap and trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And see somebody who is like using this to connect with people, and there is a life pattern. And I was just like, I just came to this idea like, duh, that's got to be what these twins that, you know, find each other after 40 years and they realize that they have a biological pattern that's so similar. They both drive the same Chevrolet, and they both are in law enforcement, and they married a woman named Betty, and they divorced her around the same time, and married another woman and with the same name, and both their sons are named James Allen, and they both have a woodshed in the back, and they make toys. I mean, like, what is that? And that is a biological pattern, and it doesn't matter if you don't have a twin, you have one. And so for, I don't know, 5,000 years at least, they have been recognizing that you have a pattern, and it's in your hands. And so it wasn't a big leap for me to then come back and just Google it and just go, well, is there somebody that isn't doing psychic work, that there's somebody who is doing life pattern work, right? That's more. And so I'm not a palmist, I'm a hand analyst. I'm looking at people's life pattern just in the same way that you take a bunch of dogs and you just take Dalmatians and go, well, they're different than Chihuahuas, you know, and they're still dogs, but they act differently. And we do the same with hands, but what you get when you really do an in-depth study is an incredible amount of specific information about what relationship, good shadow side is what you said, your highest dream to fulfill, your life purpose. I mean, you really organize and play God that way. And you can say, wow, all these people have these higher selves or a soul. You're kind of like playing God, and you're going, wow, all these people, when you organize people by fingerprints, you're organizing them by souls. Crazy, but that's true.
Like soul groups. And
that's
that's fascinating. It's kind of like you've been on this lifelong experiment where you have just been trying to see what the similarities are, because I know that with the big ones, like I mentioned, the Tony Robbins and the Snoop Dogs and all of them, they came up as being after reading their hand, you actually came up saying that they were actually always going to be something big, that according to their hand, that was their path. Is that right?
Yeah, so you know, it's a little bit tricky when you start doing projections like that. But if you look, for example, Tony Robbins, right, and you organize people with Tony Robbins fingerprints types, you're going to get the exact same energy, especially if you take his hand, which has got this crazy headline and lifeline convergence. It's called a simian line. It's drawn like a ruler comes across here, which is just radical thinking anyway. All those people have radical thinking. And then you take his fingerprints, we've got all these circles all over the place, just like this guy is nothing but gas, no brakes. And then you take that radicalness and you put that in, you're like, the guy would explode if he didn't be Tony Robbins. And there's a specific life calling for him to be on stage and deliver work that empowers other people. And that you can read in the fingerprints. You can see his highest dream. Now, if he doesn't fulfill it, you know, which can happen. I've got people that are 70 years old coming to me who have lived a very unsatisfying life. And then they finally shift it. And with me, after I show them the right light, and they're like, duh, I know this. I knew this all along. And super confirmation, and that creates this breakthrough.
So you say you've got these 70-year-olds that are coming to you. So once you've done that hand reading, and you know, they've probably gone through life and they've kind of felt like something's missing, but they haven't quite known what's been missing. So does it kind of like make them change and start to take on some of the stuff like at 70 years old to be able to sort of like fulfill some of those passions?
Yeah, they go through a physical transformation. They go through, and I'll send you some maybe before after photos of these people. What you're seeing is the massive ignorance of their nervous system suddenly switching on. So you can kind of think about this as, let's imagine like you are the greatest person with all your friends. They knew your humor. and you were amazed, and you just felt that they really got you, right?
Yeah.
And then you marry somebody for their looks, and they demand that you just stay in the kitchen and clean, right? And they don't care about your personality, and you can't express it. What would that do to you, right? But you can imagine that people aren't in just that relationship. That's the relationship to life. And so certain majority of whatever is repressed starts to go into this area called the shadow. And so they're operating only on about, let's say, that much of their nervous system. Like, no kidding, it's only,
that's crazy.
Cylinders fire, and you're only operating on one. You're going to feel depressed, and all this area that is being repressed will show up as pain, and that pain will show up as lessness. And that ultimately arrives in you as anger and shame and guilt and frustration and all that sense of repetitiveness, where you start to feel like your life is routine. And that means that you're every day, if you look back at your last 6 months and you go, well, how many of those were like really meaningful? Meaning, if I got hit by a bus and I'm replaying the months, was it a bunch of Excel sheets? Was it like, kind of like replaying the same story, same problem? I guarantee you, if you're in that, you're in the shadow. And that means that there's a percentage of you, whatever that is. Some people are 80% in the shadow. Some people are only like 20, which I'd say they're really functional at 20. The majority of the human race is operating about, sad to say, in a very victim consciousness of around over 50.
Yeah, I agree.
When you get how the hands reveal this map that's being repressed, and they say, go do this for the love of God, go into the story, you see these people literally turn about 10 years younger and physically transform.
That's amazing. Yeah, because it's information that was actually hidden within the shadow, wasn't it? So they weren't actually able to access it. So as you give them this data from their hands, then it's kind of, like you said, it's like their nervous system awakens and they go, wow, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So that's a total transformation. And so that's awesome.
I don't know that are working with doctors and oncologists and naturopaths. I'm working with at least a dozen doctors right now who are using this work, and they're using that, and they just find it so fascinating because it's clear that if you can reduce 80% of your inflammation, and inflammation is reason, it's not a contributor, it is the reason for any sickness or stress or difficulty. That's inflammation. That's just your body saying, I am unhappy, and I'm producing regulatory feelings that are supposed to be short-term, like anger. No problem with anger, shame, guilt, all those are okay.
As long as it's short-term.
Short-term, and you're carrying them because you're in a long-term story that is dissatisfying until you figure out that the story itself, your life story, happens to be a story that is not a fulfilling life story because it doesn't match your story. Then you can start to see, I'm going to be sick in that story, or shut down, or unhappy, right? In this one, I'm going to be quite happy.
So the hand, when you're doing the analysis, this kind of gives you insight into like, can you go into what the hand can tell us? Let's start off by talking about that. When you're doing a hand analysis, what can it tell us?
Sure. So there's two ways that you approach a hand analysis, right? So I'm not doing tarot cards or astrology or nothing. What I do is I have a book that I published, The Power in Your Hands, and I would encourage, if you have a chance, to go Google that. You'll see it on Amazon. It's a big coffee table book, right?
Okay.
And it's an illustrated diagram of how different people, when you go and just take any aspect of the hand, you'll see all those people with the same ring finger or the same headline. They all have the same behavioral pattern. Okay. And so when you start taking three things in the hand that are saying, I am a worker bee, I am a worker bee, I am a worker bee. It could be a short headline. It could be a big fat callous hand. It could be a very long pinky in combination with that. then you're just saying, wow, this person is, no kidding, a worker bee. There's nothing you're going to do to hold him back, right? So the very first place I go in order to define your ego and your personality, or let's say where you're in your element and where you're out of your element, right, is handshake itself. And if you raise your hand, I'm sure many of your listeners who are into and following you have a hand quite similar to this soft hand that you have. So soft hands bring a level of feeling and compassion to the person. In this case, we call this tribe the nurturers. And what that means, that person is in their element, being everything that you can say about being a humanitarian, helping other people and supporting them. And that's where you get the healing crowd through that group. When you get a hand analysis, I'm going to, of course, tell you what is your element. But it's more important for you to see what your soul wants to do with that element, right? So think of it this way. What is your current view of when the soul enters your body? What's the current thinking?
What do you mean? Well, what do I think when the soul enters my body?
Yeah. What stage? What week as a fetus?
Well, that question's a bit. I believe that before the soul enters the body, I believe that we have already chosen the body that we're going to enter. So and
people, there's 1,000 hypnotherapists out there, like 1,000 that deal in the specific transitional state where there's the life before this life, meaning that they go and they do all of the hypnotherapy and they previous memories, and at a certain point they're in a previous life, right? So it's a code or a pattern when you do that type of work, right? So there's evidence within that bunch that unanimously say that there is a pre-birth plan or pattern.
What they call the soul plan. Yeah.
Now that plan is what I'm reading in your fingerprints. And that plan has been validated since the 1960s. It's not something for you to or believe. It's a fact. It's a fact. And is that you can take anyone with and organize and say, all right, let's just get everyone who says their soul plan is to be a healer, for example, just in that example. Fine, let's get them all together. And let's just look at the fingerprints of all those people. And you're going to see they all have a circle right here. And they all have a line and it goes from here all the way. And they all tend to have a big region that sticks out like that, a big fat area. And they may have a dozen other markers you can see on my Instagram at Brent.Bruning, where you can see where I show at least 10 markers. And I can guarantee you there's many others, but I give you the top 10, flat thumb and etc. So just get that there's like this unanimous vote for a life of being a healer, and their hands look the same, right? And really specific. Understand that your fingerprint is so exact that just 1 centimeter of your fingerprint identifies you from every other person on the planet, all 8 billion of them. 1 centimeter. And I'm saying that if you get all those people together, they have the same fingerprint combinations. Now they may have a different taggy, like a record, like there's a signature there, but the circle, I'm talking the pattern in general with all the other fingers are exactly the same.
Wow, so that's cool.
Like, just get your head around, if you can just trust me with this information right now, do your due diligence and research, and or buy my book and I can explain it to you. But the key thing is that since the 1960s, a guy named Richard Unger, who has today read 70,000 hands and started this group called the International Institute of Hand Analysis, who have read 1 million. That means that we're getting this pattern since the 1960s, right? And it's really easy. The second way I said is, the first way is get all the healers and go, what's your fingerprints? The other one is just to ask, what is your life calling, and see if the map is, right? Or you can just get all people with those circles. And just in his case, he had 9,000 hands. And he's like, let's get all the ones with a circle on another finger, like the ring finger. And there you get all the people like Eminem and Snoop Dogg that are all wanting to be on stage, right? And then you get these like, wow, different, totally. Does Eminem or Snoop Dogg want to be a healer? No,
No.
They absolutely got a different thing going on. And if you tell that to them, and you're supposed to be a healer, they just look at you, right? So it's clearly wrong. It's clearly been validated many, many times over that what we're seeing here is a real soul pattern. Now, to explain it, and I'll give you like a 3-minute version of this, right? But the science is that by the notion, there's a hand. If you look at what a fetus does, it's like you have your first cell, second, and keeps growing after conception. And if you check in 7 weeks later, there's still no consciousness. No consciousness. Right? And so all you and the hand is mirroring every stage of the development, just like a tree has rings, right? So at that point, you have no fingers, you have no consciousness. You just have a palm. Therefore, the house is built. You have your essentially your unconscious side here, maybe unconscious and subconscious. Okay, and then what happens is, if you look at what the brain is, and you look at what a fetus is, it's just a backbone and a big eye, really. And look at the 7 week. What is happening there is that you can organize the brain into 3 parts. You have the reptilian brain, which is just your physical instincts. That's the only part you got. And then your subconscious and unconscious side. And then the subconscious side starts to grow even more. And then these things start to separate out. And then when that happens, you get this almost explosion of development called the limbic system, the midbrain. And it's a complicated system, about 30 parts, but the two that I want you to know, if you're watching this, you got basically the good cop and the bad cop. You got a pineal gland, third eye, and you have the amygdala, which is your stress and alert and exciting. It's not necessarily the bad guy, but it's the one that says, I need to go now. I need an urgency. Anyway, that switches on at 7 weeks. 7 to 11, it's like I'm producing serotonin, dopamine, all the yummy, and DMT, if you know anything about ayahuasca, a dose of it. And it's just moving through the system. Now the hand is amplifying this. And why the hand? Why not your elbow or your shoulder? Why the hand? It's the same reason why you just look at anything you consciously move. If you're going to map out consciousness, you're going to look at the parts that you consciously move. And if you've been watching this, my hands, I've been consciously moving them all the time. You do this so much that your hands have developed over millions of years to show all the different levels of consciousness, right? And it's your sensory cortex that is moving that. So is your lips, so is your eyes, right? And less your elbow. So if you just expand that system, it's a nervous system, right? And you expand out, your lips would be like a basketball, right? Your eyes may be like saucers, but your hands would be as big as beach umbrellas or massive. So that all that information is, the sensory cortex is not that. It's that. Your consciousness is, right? And it's flowing, and you have yang parts and you have yin parts. You have your masculine side and you have your feminine side. You think about your directing side. I want that. You don't have to teach a baby to go, I want that. Kids know that.
They know it.
Need to grasp with these. These aren't so useful or practical. But this is not just literal. This is the way your personality forms. And if you have a dominant personality or a directing personality, it doesn't take much. 10 people, just look at all the dominating people in your life and then go look at their hands. They're all going to have big, thick index fingers. And there's a different side of your personality that is expressed, your artist side, because where you put your ring on, your clever side, your rules and backbone, which is where the Saturn finger, what they call the Greeks. So anyway, just think there's a map there, right? And that map has been like explored in palmistry for at least 5,000 years. They were saying Aristotle is an ancient system, and they had a map that still is used today to describe poetically that this directing finger is the god of Olympus. And they saw that these gods are looking over Earth and Moon.
Yeah.
All right. And they were like, your instinct is my subconscious side. And then I have Olympus, and I have a directing god. I have Saturn. I have Apollo, the sunny god, and then Mercury, the communication. Well, it just so happens that's a brilliant map, right? You got Mars, who's holding a hammer. So imagine, okay, you had to know that piece, that little diatribe, because when the soul comes into the body at 7 weeks, when the pineal gland is releasing all these amazing feelings, it's coming in going, not so much about power. I'm not into that. I have struggles. I have transgenerational trauma. I'm not going to deal with this abuse situation again. No.
Ah, okay. We just froze for a sec.
Testosterone. And it comes right up there, and it gets a big ball. And what is that ball? It looks like it's called a volar pad. And if you slice that open, it's a big water balloon.
Yeah.
And that balloon stays, and it's just filled with stem cells that are being, they're growing from all of the happy hormones and serotonin and dopamine and histamine. And it's just growing right there, and says, for the love of God, give me that feeling. I love it. I love this experience. And it's not an event. 4 months, if you check in, those volar pads are still going, unless there's something dumb that happens in the pregnancy, like the mom gets in a bad relationship and abused. Yeah. Then that ball eventually says, okay, it's sealed, and the skin eventually, after 4 months, comes over that. And if it's a big ball, you get a fingerprint, a circle. And if it's less of a ball, then maybe you get a wave, and then you're going to get a vote less, and maybe get an upside down T, which says, I'm interested. I don't know about this thing. And then nothing, right? You just might get a hill. And you can see that pattern in a family. You can see it all the way up to the grandmother. Like, you just get everyone's fingerprints. And I can tell you, you got a whole family story of people that cannot deal with money. They're just totally unconscious. Yeah. And and all I have to do is just show it to you. And then they're going, that's what's got. We're all been in a fight or flight response around money. So that, you see then the shadow side of the repression of that fingerprint. Get life calling, which means exactly 2 minutes into the reading, I can tell you what you've been searching for your entire life. You just can't get your finger on it. But I can tell you that in 2 minutes, I can tell you your entire life pattern and your life map. And that was decided by a 7-week-year-old soul as a fetus. And then eventually, you end up getting these 3 lines that are formed as the rest of the system goes. When the first instinctive side, you get the lifeline, and then you get this emotional side that shows, well, how am I in a relationship? What are my needs in a relationship? And why am I not having a good time in this relationship? Because of this heart that comes up. And that's when the baby shows facial expressions, because it's the limbic system that is finished developing. Yeah. And then you have the frontal cortex here, and that's when you get the headline. And that stays for your life. That's your operating system. And then you develop a personality and says, well, I'm really in my element, being a know-it-all, knowledgeable person. And then you get these long fingers and a very quadrangle hand, and like, I'm a know-it-all, and I'm judgmental, and I'm right, you're wrong, right? And other people like Kendall Jenner that just put their naked body on Instagram every chance they get are completely a different story. But what happens if they have the same fingerprint type? Let's say they're back to the healers. Then the person with the intellectual, knowledgeable hand is going to try to research and be right about everything in the healing arts. Whereas Kendall Jenner would just follow her feelings and try to connect and a strategy, and on and on and on. And when you put this all together, you can see a story and their challenges. Yeah. And ultimately their darkest side, and how they can break through that. Wow. And once you've got that data, then it really gives you the power to be able to
to be able to say, look, this is something that I can actually move towards, because a lot of people feel so stuck in life. And it's like, I don't know what my next step is. You know, I'm working in a job that I've been working in for the last 20 years, and I don't know where I need to go next. And, you know, they're probably scared of pivoting, and they're scared of getting out of their comfort zone. So I think this is a really great tool that people can use to be able to move towards that. So, so what about, what is it? Like you say, we've got you read the hands, but you read the fingerprints as well. That's all part and parcel of it.
There's no way I'm going to let you go without reading your fingerprints. Just as impossible as happening.
Can you do that through here?
Doc, you got a fingerprint issue, right? If you're stuck and you feel your life is repetitive, or you're stuck in a relationship, the same problem that you had in the last relationship, guaranteed that problem is in your fingerprints. And I'm going to show that without any agenda. You're going to send the photos of your hands and your fingers, you know, preferably like that. You get your thumb. You send it to me, and I will prepare a diagram and send it over to you before the hand reading. I'm not doing any research or checking out anything else. I don't care about that, because it doesn't necessarily inform me, because I might be in the wrong life according to your hand. So I'm here to try to give you this more expressed life, so that you're leaving understood, happy, acknowledged, and validated to move into that chapter of your life. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think it's definitely something that it's definitely something I'm going to do. And I think it's definitely something that people can actually get a little bit more information, like as to their future paths. So you were talking before about the different elements, and you were talking about earth, fire, air, and water. And based on the shape of the hand, and based on the height of the palm or something, and the fingers. So does each different element have different hand types?
Yeah.
Yeah. And exactly. So what does that tell you?
Well, it just says where you're in your element, right? So if you just look at, for example, let's just take a basic one. Let's take a farmer's hand, right? Farmer's hand, I don't know if you can just look into your memory banks and try to imagine a big, you know, just basic, simple farmer. And, you know, you try to talk hand reading with him, and his eyes are going to glaze over. It's the most boring thing, because it's like, how can I use this? Yeah. They tend to have a heavier body, and their hands really are just about, their fingers start right here and end there, right? That's their fingers. And their hand is just really broad, and they have only 3 lines, just like carved in, like they just milk the cow, and they're just living that routine. So telling him that he should live an exciting, dynamic life with supermodels waiting outside your trailer, like we saw with Snoop Dogg, makes no sense. It's just, it doesn't even, it occurs as even repelling. So that, if you look at all those people with that hand type, they would say the exact same thing. They need a simple life. They marry at 18. They got their kids. They're working in something. They have what is people that they've known for 35 years, and they've been seeing them regularly on Friday night without a beat, right? So, you know, then you just that's the earth element, and they're really the ones who have built everything around you.
Yeah. Right? Okay.
World comfortable. Then you have the water element, which is, we'll take Kendall again, and that is a hand that looks like super seaweed. It's really elegant. It's in every hand model commercial, you know, and you should have this dainty, slender hand. And if you look at the skin quality, it's super sensitive. So if I'm reading their hands, they're sweating already. Yeah, right? Okay. When they cry, they're water. So the emotions are just really right through their hands, because your hands express their emotions. You lose between about 1 pint to 2 pints of sweat through your hands. That's based on how emotional. And they're doing 3 to 4, right? So that means that if you just leave your fingerprint, just to get this idea, you can tell from that, just like drinking, the difference between Diet Coke and regular Coke, the FBI, since it was published, and who knows how long they've known this, but they can tell exactly what mood you're in, what you've been eating, and what is exactly what you were doing from that fingerprint. Why? Because everything you're doing is neurochemical. Meaning this Zoom has a neurochemical signature. And when you that, and if it's really intense, that means that you can actually identify based on histamine, serotonin, dopamine, that cocktail, oxytocin, you can get that person is having that experience. Now, why the fingerprints are really interesting there. Some people love that. They love it. Right. And when you look at some people really love. They need a lot of intimacy and closeness, for example. And then therefore you would say, you know, if you don't have it, you're just shut down. That's it. Your rocket fuel is having a really intimate, emotionally soul-based communication, and everyone's your soul sister, your soul brother, or they're not. But if you get that, and you get how important that is, in the same way that I don't like Brussels sprouts, but to somebody out there, it's enough to selling it, and they like it, and it's just they keep doing it, right? And that's not our game, but they have a taste for it. And when you put this like non-negotiable need that a person has for certain experiences in with Kendall Jenner's water hand, now you're starting to get a story that she can't get out of. She really needs to have emotions. And she needs to have an emotional, or that oxytocin, that emotional connection. And now she's in the right movie. And anytime that she's not in that movie, she's completely in her shadow.
Yeah. So you're kind of going against what you're supposed to be, what your soul plan is. And so that's when you start to feel apathy and, you know, the lower vibration emotions. So fantastic. So that's earth and that's water. What about fire?
Fire, if you look at, let's say Snoop Dogg is a great example, or Eminem, they have super short fingers, right? So my hands are not super short. I'm talking that maybe that is a super, if you look at kind of imagine fingers that are about, right? So if their fingers are about like that, and if you look at the hand, it looks like it looks like there's just a cobweb of lines that are just zigzagging all over the place. That's fire energy, right? So Snoop Dogg or Eminem, they don't bend their hands more than the farmer, clearly. They're just more neurotic. They're more exciting. They're more creative, right? And you can replicate that neuroticism by going through months of electric shock therapy, right? So you can just literally take somebody, it's a way to cure depression in the 1960s. They would put the electric shock on you. And that, if you look at somebody who's gone through 3 months of that, they have all these crazy lines in their hands afterwards. And so what that is that's the electrochemical ionic response that produces yourself as saying, I'm energetic and spirited. Spirited, right? So I'm not emotional. I'm not down to earth. I'm spirited, which means I need a certain I need a certain nutrition to be spirited, right? Like I'm not going to get spirited milking the cows, nor am I going to get spirited going into areas of deep emotions. I mean, get spirited when I'm doing something controversial. And I'm doing something creative that gets me on fire and gives me a challenge, you know, and I'm on stage and I'm like, you know, battling somebody. I mean, that gets you right into that energy, right? And so no surprise, pretty much every rap artist out there.
I was going to say, it's probably every rap artist,
You know, you could be in project management and have it, but your just approach about how that's done is going to be, you're just going to go right into the transformational change of any software IT project, because I've been watching people, you know, since I've known this, taking those contracts. So that's the fire side. And of course, we just talked about the intellectual side, which is the more shoeboxy. Now, what's really fascinating about those long fingers, and you just take that and say, well, what happens if you look at somebody who is traditionally in higher education? right? And they have fingers, they have long palms, and they have long lines. Everything they just do long, right? They just concentrate, they research a long time, they talk and analyze a long time, and so they're just super cerebral. In other words, they're just using that part of their brain. They're not interested in the others, which means they're disconnected from water, their emotions, earth, getting things in a practical level because they're just in research, right? Fire, being on fire and spirited. They're just neutral and just going on in a robotic way like this all the time. And they're even communicating like this, saying, I'm still trying to understand the sense of this. It seems like a good methodology, right?
Yeah. And we kind of need all of these elements, don't we? That's the thing. In order to be balanced, we need all of these elements.
We have all of them.
Yeah.
So when you
but one's just higher.
The hand is developed into 4 parts.
Yeah.
So you have your directing side. What do you think that is? That's your fire side, the holding. You have your interesting side, your communication side. That's your air. And then you have a sexy side, their physical side here. And if somebody has that, then they're really vital and they have a lot of animal magnetism and charisma. And then you have somebody that's reflective. So anything that goes down into that area is showing, or any of these lines that's showing the arteries of those different energies. Now, why that's important is that we're all human beings, right? We're not just air. I'm just saying that when at some point your ego says that's the safe place to be.
Yeah.
And if you're a spiritual person, you'll understand how much the spiritual group just battles the ego and you need to let go of the ego. I'm not in that category. I've come to the conclusion that the ego, you're not going to get rid of it. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm the same, Brent. I don't believe in trying to get rid of the ego. I believe in working alongside the ego. And I believe that we can have an ego and we can have, the ego's us. We're not going to get rid of it. And the ego actually allows us to survive in the 3D world. But I do believe that our higher self or our superconscious has the ability to work alongside it and to take the reins a little bit more. And that's the thing, we can tap into it, and rather than try and say, okay, let's get rid of the ego, because yes, there are people out there that say we need to squash it. But I really think that if we can work and love our ego and then work alongside it, I think we're way better off.
If you try to squash the ego, you know what you're going to do? You're going to put yourself right in the shadow.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's no way around it. God designed you and you have a family history, because part of your ego, whether you like it or not, you might be an intellectual, but if you look upstream, you've got a whole family of them. Yeah. And so what does it mean? It's hereditary, which means it's biological and there's nothing you can do about that. So there's a lot that you just need to surrender, that this is the way God or your mom and dad just decided this is where we've made you, and this is it, and you just got to surrender to it.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we have been talking for a long time, but I've been really thoroughly enjoying this. One thing I do want to check with you before we do go, because I do know you've got another call, is with the lines that we have, we've got the headline, we've got the heart line, we've got the lifeline. And so what are if you're looking at your lines, is it based on the length of the line, the depth of the line, or how would you be able to figure out? How do you figure that out? Like when you're looking just at your lines?
How do you figure what out?
Well, how do you it takes a lot of years to figure out palmistry, but is it the depth of the line that determines, like, say you've got a really long headline, is that kind of indicating that you're more in your head, or like how does that kind of work?
So the easy answer there is that there is a different relationship between whether a line is faintly drawn with a gentle pencil, or thickly drawn, or whether the line is wide, or whether the line is thin, whether the line is short, where it ends, how long it goes, right? So we're talking a major amount of information just from. So
I was going to say, a lot of information.
So just taking the headline, the short answer to that, if you just want to just on the length of it, that means that the longer any line is, the more you're spending in that energy. And if you have a line, generally that means you're spending a lot of time doing that as an engine.
Okay. And so is your lifeline, is that more of like, which line is it that connects to your spiritual, more of your spiritual side?
So you have the lifeline here that's developed when you arrive on the planet. And then you have a heart line that shows your emotional side. And then you have your headline that comes down. The more you think about the spiritual world and the more you reflect down, the more your headline droops down into this region. But you also have a line that goes intuition that can do that, right? You also have other markers as well as especially the fingerprints. But what you need to understand that the hand goes from down here and it goes all the way up to here. So you're seeing the path of your soul's evolution, what you go from the deepest part of your ego, like let's just say I'm on a path of power. Can happen. If that's the case, then that's that map of what you're here to do and how to do that is all here. Claim your territory. Go and get your organization and get your go through the initiation and get your plans and get your credentials, find your vision, and then see the fingerprint and what it's doing. And then you can see, and that is where I'm going to expand the visions of everyone else.
So there is a massive amount of data, in there, and I'm excited to actually get this worked on, just to see sort of like what mine says. So fantastic. Thank you so much, Brent, for being here. Is there something else you'd like to let my listeners know before I say goodbye to you? Maybe how they can get in touch with you? I did look at your website. It was beautiful.
Yeah, go look at my website, and I'll leave your listeners with a coupon codes because I want to know where these people are coming from. So I'll give you guys a coupon code, and then you just use this coupon code, and we'll meet there. And what you do is you just, once you book and you apply the promo code, then just look down in the comments. You'll see what the promo code and the site link is, www.thepowerinyourhands.com. When you book, you can also, you'll get a calendar and it'll be 2 hours. And then you're going to there'll be instructions to send photos of your hands. And then I create a diagram that shows your soul path, the nature of your soul, your life purpose, your operating system, what your special talents are. And if you have a chance, go look at the video on my site that explains how that creates a shadow in your life and what is going to be your shadow struggle, the biggest life struggle you're going to have in your life. And how do you break through that? And I'm going to give that to you in a diagram beforehand. And then we're going to spend 2 hours talking about it.
Fantastic.
When you book, there's always a incentive because I want people to share their experience, because people don't get that this is an amazing new technology that's out only in the years. And so when you book, I would encourage you to use the coupon code for the friend. There's one that says friend referral, and they'll get 100 off if you book at the same time with this coupon code. And, you just share that with that. So I recommend use the network that you got and use it as a gift for them, because it really is a phenomenal gift for somebody.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Brent. And I hope that you really thoroughly enjoy Italy for the next couple of days and you get a good wind down time. But I will put the links in the show note. If you can send me across the coupon code and stuff, I'll put all that in there. And thank you so much for your time today.
It was a pleasure. Great questions. And would love to have a follow-up with you about the soul consciousness, because there's so much to unpack just within what I've seen around the higher self and the communication we have to that as seen through the fingerprints and lines.
Absolutely. And, I'll probably have you back on again and we'll delve deeper into the soul side of it now that people have learned all about the hands. So thank you so much. And listeners, go across to the website. The power is in your hands.
The power in your hands.
Thepowerinyourhands.com. And I'll speak to you later, Brent.
Thank you very much.